Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand spanking new episode of Back to Basics, where we definitely never have technical difficulties. I don't know what you're talking about. My name is Pastor Don. I am the pastor of Unfinished Community, and for my sins, I'm the host of this program running forever and into eternity. And joining me in our eternal march forward through the Bible is the wonderful, the illustrious, the magnificent, the magnanimous, the insert adjective here, Courtney Fraley. And as an added bonus snark, we are joined today by an actual llama, Micah, who is both the minister of the Llama Pack and the host of the Word in Black and Red podcast, which for some reason keeps asking me to show up, despite the fact that every time I show up, I just snark at people until there's nothing left but dust.
Wait, so you go other places and do my job?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, here the energy that you normally bring to this program, he just brings to my program. So, hi everybody. My name is Micah, the wise old llama MB, and I'm the minister, a minister to those who are left on the outside. We jokingly call ourselves the Llama Pack because we were the folks who were left outside of the sheepfold. And the Word in Black and Red is a leftist Bible study podcast that goes through every portion of the scriptures to understand the Bible in a leftist and liberationist perspective so that we can elucidate the ways it is a story of healing, love, and liberation for all people. So I hope that if you enjoy this and enjoy what I have to say here, you'll come and join us for the other podcast where we have wonderful folks like Don and many other wonderful guests on to discuss the ways that the Bible leads us toward liberation.
So today, first off, thank you all for being here. I love it when we have a multi-guest show. It tends to be wild.
It is.
Yeah. Today we are, for those of you, by the way, following at home who don't know how we do things, we tend to record these in batches. So a couple of episodes at a time is when we normally record these and break them up for your viewing pleasure. Because despite what it may seem, I am not constantly sitting at my computer with all the time in the world. Oh my God. So we record these in big chunk batches. And today we're recording a bunch of them because we're in the middle of our summer hiatus. So we are starting a big move through Exodus from chapter 4. And we are just going to go hog wild on this beast. Today we are kicking off chapter 4.
Dense. Like, it's so dense so far. I'm kind of enjoying it.
Yeah, so we're kicking off chapter 4 with Moses's miraculous power. We're going to do just verses 1 through 17 in today's episode. We're going to kick back in verse 18 in the next, and we're just going to keep hammering through these things like we are Longinus' associates. So we are going to just nail it. Deep cut Bible joke for you if you appreciate that. So, all right. I am going to poll our wonderful group of people here and ask if anybody would like to read our text for today. We got 2 guests, so I might not have to actually work today.
Since when am I a guest? I'm your co-host, bitch. Okay, this is. Everyone knows I wear fake.
No, you're right. You're right. That was my misstep. You are definitely the hell, I'm basically the co-host at this point.
I would say, Micah, if you want to go, otherwise I would be more than happy to read.
Sure, I'm happy to do so. Then Moses answered, "But look, they may not believe me or listen to me, but say, 'The Lord did not appear to you.' The Lord said to him, 'What is that in your hand?' He said, 'A staff.' And God said, 'Throw it on the ground.' So he threw the staff on the ground, and it became a snake, and Moses drew back from it. Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Reach out your hand and seize it by the tail.' So he reached out his hand and grasped it, and it became a snake in his hand, so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you." Again the Lord said to him, "Put your hand inside your cloak." He put his hand into his cloak, and when he took it out, his hand was diseased, as white as snow. Then God said, "Put your hand back into your cloak." So he put his hand back into his cloak, and when he took it out, it was restored like the rest of his body. If they will not believe you or heed the first sign, they may believe the second sign. If they will not believe even these 2 signs or listen to you, you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. But Moses said to the Lord, "O my Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor even now that you have spoken to your servant. but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. Then the Lord said to him, Who gives speech to mortals? Who makes them mute or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, and I will be your mouth and teach you what you are to speak. But he said, Oh, my Lord, please send someone else. Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and God said, What of your brother Aaron the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Even now he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, his heart will be glad. You will speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be your mouth, and with his mouth, and will teach you what you shall do. He indeed shall speak for you to the people. You shall serve as a mouth for you, and you shall serve as God for him. Take in your hand the staff, with which you shall perform the signs.
All right, so we have a bit to discuss here. There's going to be a lot of takeaways from this. I'll say for myself, my first takeaway from this passage is that very clearly whiteness is a disease. And that seems to be the direction we're going with. And also, I have always wondered this. Every children's children's Bible I ever read growing up that depicted Moses, like everyone else, as an old white guy, interestingly left that particular part of the miracles out. Like his hand became white, like he was already white. Like
I don't remember that part at all.
Yeah, because
And
he
I
was a
grew up
fucking
in the
brown
church.
dude.
I grew up Episcopal, like going to Sunday school every week for years and years. I do not remember the withered hand thing. I remember the snake thing. I remember thinking, that's odd. I thought snakes were usually a symbol of evil in the Bible.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting to me, I'm gonna
Because I've been
dive
snarky
right into.
since I was yay high.
I'm gonna dive right into Alter here, and I'm gonna read this here as well because kind of interesting. The Hebrew Metzora represented here in his translation as blanched is rendered as leprous or diseased or et cetera, in other translations. Modern scholarly consensus is that what is involved is some kind of disfiguring skin disease other than leprosy. The comparison with snow would not refer to flaking, as some have claimed, because like snow is a known biblical simile for total whiteness, in this case of skin, loss of all pigmentation. So this isn't like the idea of it being withered or disfigured or flaking or peeling or leprous is academically
I was picturing
inaccurate.
a really nasty case of hand, foot, and mouth disease.
No, he just got white.
All right, listen.
Yeah, I mean that's, and I think that's like a super important point here to realize, particularly for those of us who are reading these Bible verses from a white perspective, is that not only was Moses not white, but that whiteness as a just a physical concept, whiteness of skin, was so dramatically different from their own lived-in experience that it counted as a plague.
I mean, I'm sitting here, and as I accept it, because it's not often that that I get hit with the like, oh, cause you're white, and I'm not like, yeah, but I'm like, oh, but honestly, it's not. I'm gonna get hate for this. I am an white person, if you haven't noticed, but I mean, yeah, we have done a heck of a lot of a number on things.
Mm-hmm. That is definitely
The white as snow thing. Could that be? Sorry, I'm intrigued by this.
Mm-hmm.
Could that be like a post-mortem, like faded grade sort of skin that they're talking about?
Not impossible, but based on the notes I'm reading in the translation, unlikely. I'd say it's probably closer to albinism than like what we would consider contemporary whiteness, but definitely it doesn't seem to carry the connotations of disease or destruction that would be consistent with a withered hand or a leprous hand or a diseased hand. It doesn't. We don't have any discussions of modeling.
It does say diseased.
It does in that translation. I think it's interesting because in the translation that we have here, the NRSVUE, let me bring that up here. Which verse is this? Go up here. Put your hand inside your cloak. It was diseased white as snow is what the NRSVUE says, but Alter makes specific point of that because his verse reads, and he put his hand back into his bosom and brought it out, and look, his hand was blanched like snow. So that's the translation Alter uses, and he specifically does turn on that term I mentioned earlier, metzoraat, which he represents as blanched. Older translations have rendered that as leprous or diseased, but modern scholars, and I'm really just rereading what he said, modern scholars generally believe that it's not a skin disease like leprosy, it's just a loss of pigmentation. So the term disease is arguably unnecessary here. And in context, blanched makes more sense. Again, the nuances of translation.
Yeah, no, it's just alarming to realize that basically he drew out like a Scandinavian hand. And it's like,
and behold, a white
what is
dude.
this shit? That's I wonder when that changed too, because there are you know how hard I holler for Jesus wasn't white, but at the same time, like, there are people like from the Middle East who are Arabic who are white. Like,
Well, to be
that's
clear,
a thing
I don't
you see. Was that not a thing? Was that not a thing?
Well, I don't think the representation is that we're dealing with a dark ebony Ethiopian style person here for the majority
No, I'm
of the
not
people
saying
here.
that.
I think that this was a man who had some degree of melanin and was not, in fact, Scandinavian. And again, I do say the act of blanching is probably closer to albinism than what we would call quote unquote modern whiteness. So like there is that indication here, but also the dramatics of it are indicative that regionally speaking, they were probably definitely more brown than what we would call white. And of course, there's going to be variation in that community. In the Egyptian area, even today, the general populace leans more brown than white. But it was dramatic enough to be surprising.
Yeah. Sorry, this just threw me for a freaking loop.
Yeah. And this is territory we get into when we start making broad-based assumptions that everybody has the same physical traits in a given area. It's never the case. Like, hell, there were black samurai. Like, shit happens. And that's a whole discussion for a whole nother cultural podcast that I'm sorry, I'm too busy. I'm not actually starting.
It would be dope.
It's also worth talking about the fact that like the construct of whiteness is something that happens very recently. The construct of whiteness was invented in the 1600s, right shortly after indentured servants who were from Europe and slaves who were from Africa got together because they realized that we're both poor and the rich people are keeping both of us down. And so if we unite, we can defeat them. And the rich people said, well, we have to find some way of appealing to you that gets you on our side and builds solidarity with each other.
They're lesser than you.
Exactly. And so we
means you're a little bit more special, right? You won't get anything more, but you're a little more special.
Yeah, exactly. So we bought into the myth of white supremacy and gave up solidarity that could actually lead to substantial material changes and improvements in our lives. And so the lie of white supremacy has always been an economic cudgel against the poor. And even today, we see white people who will vote against their own benefits, their own Medicare benefits, their own Social Security benefits, their own kids' educational benefits, their health care, all of these things, just so that Black and brown people can't have access to them. And like, how sad is it that exists in the world? But that all, to the side, that white people have been lied to in this way. I don't think it's that Moses's hand has changed race. It's just it's just that it has become scourged. The word tsara in the Hebrew is most literally is to scourge, and so that strange word is what's going on here. We're trying to understand what it is in context of the whiteness.
I can see how much Don is working over there, and this is going to go into a theology off. Shall I take a pound?
No, I'm looking up the word that he's referring to.
It's
okay, cool.
My pronouns are they. My pronouns are they them, and it is Strong's H68.
Yeah, you're looking at
6879.
Tsara is the root. The one we're doing with here is metzoraat. That's the one I referenced earlier. This is where Alter's input is very, very helpful here, is because even like the biblical usages and Strong's and stuff do tend to lean towards more scourged and stuff like that, which is why I tend to rely for moments like this on guys like Alter and stuff who are more Jewish scholars than kind of the historical Christians and Christian adjacent folks who've written things like the BDB and what have you, because he's kind of pulling away from that kind of traditional interpretation as scourging and more towards an issue of coloration. But again, we can argue a bunch of white Christians over the Hebrew as much as we want. It's not gonna.
Well, it's not. Yeah, it's not to argue the translation. I'm just saying that what the literal word here is scourge, and what Alter is doing there is beyond the literal and going towards what is the meaning behind this, because leprosy does not show up. The traditional translation of this is as leprous as snow, but leprosy is not a disease that shows up as whiteness, as you were talking about earlier.
Right.
No.
And so, like, we have to recognize that's not actually what leprosy is, and so we have to change our understanding of what that is.
Yeah.
We understand. If this is as clear as that, then it means we understand this word less than we thought we did. Ancient languages be that way. I don't have the full seminary education, but I know that much.
Yeah. One of the earlier, Courtney, you were talking about the fact that the snake, that your like conception of the snake is that it's usually a negative thing in Scripture. Excuse me. But actually, like in the book of Exodus, it's not. The story of sorry, not just in the book of Exodus, but in the Torah, specifically in the story of Moses, snakes are not always a negative thing. So first off, we have this snake that's showing up here. But near the end of Moses' story, we have this moment where snakes have come into the camp because God is angry at the people for not obeying yet again in the midst of all this. The snakes come in, they start to bite people, they start to poison people. And so what Moses does is he puts up a copper or bronze snake up on a pole and raises that up into the sky. And people who look at that snake, they are saved because they've looked at this snake. And we've actually seen a lot of
this
these
is so
appear.
Like off-brand from what I'm accustomed to. That's so wild.
It's a magic amulet, right? Like it is a magical, probably idolatrous amulet, and we've seen a bunch of them archaeologically throughout history appearing. That, but it's here in the text as something that Moses did that helped save the people.
This is going to be a trip. Exodus is going to be a freaking trip, isn't it?
Well, this
it's
is
all going to be a trip.
It's all a trip.
Oh, that's later. That's. Oh my God, that's 2 books from now. Oh, the Pentateuch is so long.
We're gonna be at this for a while.
Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy.
I'm guessing when we do finally get there that we can probably move through at least Leviticus at a bit more of a clip, because a lot of it is, okay, this is what they were trying to do with all this stuff. That's bullshit, that's bullshit, that's bullshit. It doesn't actually apply. This is different, yada, yada, yada. And we're just going to probably line by line through it a lot quicker. But here, we're still in narrative territory. So, all right, anything else we want to pry at here? We're actually doing pretty good for time, surprisingly, which is a bit out of character.
Okay, well, we haven't... I would like to say I felt a little personally called out by the... Can't you pick somebody else?
Yeah.
I didn't sign on for this. Like, oh, come on.
Yeah, I gotta say, chapters like, verses 10 through, say, 10 through 16 or 17 there. Pretty much every seminary and pre-seminary student and everybody in the ordination process ever has had that exact same conversation with God. Like, the fuck, man? Why me?
Yep. Can confirm.
Yeah, it's wild, but it's also like, you see evangelicals bringing it up more, which confuses me now, but like historically speaking, at least for those of us who came up in the kind of traditional church, Moses's kind of absolute shittiness at public speaking is not ever really brought up. At least it wasn't for me growing up. It wasn't mentioned a whole lot. I do, as I said, I find it weird that evangelicals really love to bring up, haha, Moses had a stutter, but he became the best. Like, okay, sure, like, you're not wrong. But, like, for me growing up, his complete lack of public speaking skills was never ever discussed. And I actually remember using this as an example for a colleague of mine, as to why, because this colleague of mine was lamenting the fact that they couldn't sermon very well.
May I pause you? I'm hanging onto a thought as long as I can, but my ADD will let go of it.
Go.
Fudge! Hang on.
Oh no, we were too late.
It's because all that really works is, excuse me, I gotta interrupt. What were you talking about like 2 sentences ago?
I was talking about various seminary and pre-seminary students and people in the
ordination. Oh, the stutter
process.
thing. Hang on. So are you telling me that the evangelical church has been glorifying the idea of Moses having a stutter as an overcoming thing, and then turned around and joined in with making fun of admitted old man I'm glad is getting out of office, Joe Biden, for having a stutter?
Yep.
Are you fucking kidding me?
What? The evangelicals are loaded with hypocrisy?
Just that it knows no bounds. Like, it keeps finding new lows. Like, they're gonna hit a Balrog eventually, right?
One would think. But I thought that's what Trump was, so...
Yeah, they hit a Balrog a long time ago. His name was Mammon. So the thing that I love about this story is actually not that Moses overcomes the stutter, right? That we actually, what's happening here is that Moses has a disability that God then accommodates. It's not that Moses has a disability and then God says, well, I'll find somebody else then. You're not good enough. You're not up to snuff.
And it's also not that he magically heals him either. Like, the disability is still there.
Yep, the disability does not go away. I have a stutter as well. It is probably the most irritating thing to me when I'm re-listening to the podcast before my editors give me the final version, is I'll go through and be like, you got to cut out this stutter and you got to cut out that stutter. And I manage it. I manage it in a lot of ways. But I think that one of the most effective messages that I've ever given is when I could not get through the words I was trying to say. And so I just stopped trying to say them. And when I stopped trying to say them, I let the Spirit say what the Spirit was trying to say instead of the words that I thought that I had lined up there.
Yeah.
So, but here in this story, Moses does not get rid of the disability. Instead, God accommodates it so that Moses can still be a part of God's plan, despite this barrier that the rest of our society sets up to say, no, you don't belong in leadership. You don't belong in the pulpit. You don't belong in charge because you have a disability that we're going to, that makes it harder to understand you or makes it, more difficult for us, rather than saying, how can we make your ability to communicate easier for you so that the rest of us can understand what you have to contribute to what we're doing. And God does that by bringing Aaron alongside and saying, I'll speak to you, you speak to Aaron, Aaron will do the speaking, so that the rest of the people have that accommodation and are able to understand what I'm doing through you.
Right. And the interplay between Moses and God in that moment is, I think, extremely important too. Because Moses is trying to back out of doing what God wants on account of the disability. He knows his limitations. Like, he knows that his abilities in this area are not regional typical. They're not typical of the other people surrounding him. And so, like, yeah, Lord, I don't have the ability here. You're going to want to find somebody else. And we have this line here where, what is it? The altar puts it as, the wrath of the Lord flared up against Moses, and he said, is there not Aaron, the Levite? You were like, that has always been a sticking point for some folks that I know who've gotten into this discussion, is that Moses said, I have a disability, and God got pissed. But that's not what's happening here. And I really want to highlight that, is that Moses said, because of my disability, I cannot do your work. And God said, the fuck you can't. And that is a key mood that we have to pay attention to here, is that, like, we see in the Bible, like, various iterations of the Lord got angry, is it's not God saying, you stupid disabled person, yada, yada, as people would say, like, I can heal you. What are you getting on? I was like, you think that
He's
I
not
am
letting him use excuses.
right.
He's being like, okay, well, you'd have to think about how to do this, but look, here comes your brother. Like, we can make this work. I am
Right.
God.
Like God's attitude right there. Do you think me so small that your limitations would be my own? Like, and that's God just be, no, you dumbass. I picked you. I didn't pick the one part of you and want to change the rest. I picked you. All right, reasonable accommodation. We don't have the ADA yet, but you know what? We're going to work on it.
Well, and the phrase here is Af Adonai Hara Moshe, which is Af and Hara literally translate to, and God's nose became hot, right? That word there, that euphemism is a metaphor that the Bible usually just pretty straightforwardly translates as, and the anger of the Lord was kindled. And here that there's a word added in here that's assumed to be here, against Moses, right? But the against is not there in the text. Af Adonai hara Moshe does not say that God was angry at Moses. It says that God's nostrils became hot, an expression that does mean that God was angry. But what does that evoke? Like when you get frustrated and all that heat is right there in the center of your face because you're angry at something. But I don't think that that's God being angry at Moses. I think that's God being angry at the injustice that God has chosen this perfectly capable person, this person that God wants to use to bring about this change. And God is saying, oh, your society isn't going to accept you because you're different? That's bullshit. And I think that's what God's anger is happening there. That's not a condemning anger. That's not a I'm angry at you. I think that's I'm angry that this is the way that society works in this moment, and I want to change that.
And I do love the idiom of using like his nose was kindled. Like it's not literally like he was pissed. Like there is a word for anger and wrath and things like that. Those come later, and I think it's worth potentially. I would make the argument looking at this as, and the Lord was annoyed.
Oh no!
Like
Oh.
again.
Yep. It's curious how long it takes us to just see like the hesitation and be like, oh,
Yeah.
we used to wait.
And
we
is the
good?
recording going to get? There we go. Is the recording going to see what we see, or is it going to see what Don sees?
It's going to be wild one way or the other, and I don't know.
Every time it happens, like this time, you were like,
you know,
it took us like a few seconds, both of us, to be like, he's frozen, isn't he?
I have no idea
how long of a pause might be reasonable.
I have no idea why it's doing this, and it's annoying me, but we make it through.
It's also funny.
Yes. My point was that it is equally reasonable for us to consider translating this because of its idiomatic use and the fact that there are other words for wrath and anger and like the real divine vitriol of the Lord. It's just as reasonable for us to translate this, and the Lord got annoyed. Like, there isn't really, I'm not going to say there isn't, because I'm sure there is somewhere. I don't know every word in Hebrew, but there isn't in common use that I've come across in biblical Hebrew, like a word for being just kind of annoyed, like the fuck dude, kind of, what the hell is your problem? Like that, like it tends to either dial all the way up to 11 or not be mentioned at all. And so I think there is, I say again, as white Christian scholar reading the Hebrew here, I think there is at least a somewhat reasonable case to be made for saying, and the Lord was a bit annoyed and said, fuck, man.
Well, the word that I would really like to translate here instead, and the Lord was flustered. Like flustered to me is like a better turn of phrase there, because like annoyed connotates a very specific, like sort of like I'm annoyed at you, right? Anger is I'm angry at you, right? But flustered is like, what the fuck? Like I'm angry at the state of these things. Like I don't understand why things are this way, and not necessarily connoting some sort of guilt on the other party that I think anger or annoyance communicates. I think flustered is more like a why? why are these things the way that they are? And I'm a little bit overwhelmed that they are the way they are.
And I will say, dear viewer slash listener, and my illustrious co-hosts as well, we have now arrived at what modern theologians refer to as the Eugene Peterson problem.
Okay, I'm not getting the reference, and you both
He's the dude who
Please
did The
explain.
Message.
I love The Message.
I hate it.
Well, you can get over yourself.
You know, I get what he was trying to
He
do. I
openly
do.
hates The Message. Does.
Yeah, I do. That is
The-
like,
The
I
Message
get it.
saved my faith. I am absolutely here to support The Message. Gung
I'm-
ho. If you're reading the Bible, good on you, unless you're reading the NIV or the ESV. But
Oh boy, we're not going to turn this into a discussion of Bible technique. My issue with The Message, and I'll boil it down simply, is the fact that it's, in order to get as contextual as a message tries to get, it has to distance itself more from a literal accuracy to the source material, which like worked for the period of time in which it was written, but contextual translations like that age like milk. Like, they don't last for super long, and when you have a translation that ages like milk that people have as foundational to their faith that don't then go into later scholastics and research, it leads to some very confusing conversations a generation or two down the line when you're trying to explain, no, this actually meant something totally different, but we translated it that way just for this particular... It turns into a mess very, very quickly. And this is the biggest problem with biblical translation, is that the original texts were meant to be understood in that way, contextually. And we're now trying to do the same thing farther down the line. So the reason you like The Message and the reason I hate it are the same reason, is they are contextual in a way that is incredibly meaningful to a narrow select band of people, which you happen to be one of them, which is great for you. I'm so glad it was effective for you. The problem is, in the broader scheme of translation, it creates a boatload of other issues that I wind up
It
having
doesn't
to
really
deal
claim
with.
to be a translation, though, does it? Isn't it? Doesn't it claim to be like a modernized paraphrase?
yeah.
That's the
Well, and
claim,
so
but you know,
So I'm not gonna spend more time on this.
which
on-
we all
on
say
defending The
before
Message
spending
in
more
this
time
podcast.
on it.
Yeah, exactly. Let me just not spend any more time by doing 2 hours on why The Message is good. No, but you know, all of that aside,
Do
the
a special
phrase
on
in
it.
the Hebrew,
Send us a link. Yeah.
the phrase in the Hebrew is a metaphor that
Yeah.
translators have tried to translate into our context, but it's a metaphor that was written just like you said, like that the message doesn't work, 20 years out of its time. There's a version of the Bible that I think is the hillbilly edition
Oh God, I need
of
to
the
see
gospel or
this.
something, and like it is very specific to like 1980s hillbilly slang that is no longer used in those communities, and so it's a foreign object even to those. It would be like doing a translation that uses the word swag, right? And
This
the Lord was very pleased with the swag that the people had gathered or something. Like it's very specific to a time period, and the metaphors in the Bible are also specific to that time period.
Right.
And so when we're trying to translate them out, I think that we do have the freedom to say, well, is God's anger really flustered here in the context of this story? Is God angry about this, or is God more flustered at this? And I think it's perfectly reasonable, based on that metaphor, to say that God is flustered. That redness of the nose that I get when I'm annoyed, when I'm flustered, is also what's trying to be communicated here in what God is doing.
Yeah, and essentially to
if
sum
I
it up,
might-
that's what we're dealing with here. And I'll say this as one line, and then I'll let Courtney say her piece. This is exactly the issue with biblical translation: is when do we go literal and when do we go figurative here? And no one's ever had a good answer for that. Take it away, Courtney.
I may go. Honestly, especially like listening to how Micah talks about it, like it seems like something that could be a really useful tool overall, so long as they were in like dated editions. Like, this is a paraphrase. Like, it's not the Bible; it's a useful paraphrase of the Bible for the Bible studdily challenged to get a look over and get an idea before they try attempt more in-depth study. I think it's a really fascinating concept, but yes, anything like that is going to age like milk. I think it would be fascinating to see it done over and over as an exploratory thing, not as a translation of the Bible. And I, honest to God, like, I love it or hate it, it's not a translation. The message is not a translation. It's a paraphrase. There's a big difference. We learned this in middle school. It's okay.
It's almost like these are a bunch of stories that were told by people to their communities and retold in different ways and repackaged in different ways continuously for every generation that changed, and then eventually somebody wrote down, and it's almost like the stories are alive and should be told as if they're living stories. Like these are ultimately folk tales, right?
I'm getting more and more irritated, and I want to be like, they've got a point.
I'm not irritated. Like you're right. It's like I'm annoyed because I have less to say.
Well, these
I don't get to talk anymore. Like Mike has got all my points. You stole my line.
And with that, maybe we better wrap up this episode.
Well,
no,
just to finish the point real quick, is that these stories are folklore, right? And folklore is something that is living, and it is something that is told over and over again. And so, like right now with my buddy Matt Meyer, we're working on a series of children's stories where we're retelling the story. Well, in 20 years, we're going to have to do it again, because the way that we communicate to children in 20 years is going to be different from the way that we communicate with children right now. And, in 20 years after that, they're going to have different Bible stories, because there's always these new ways of trying to understand and to communicate what's being said here. And I think that goes right along with what is happening with Moses, is that God is perfectly willing to say, oh, you're not understanding, or you're not the best way of communicating this. I will give you another way of communicating this. That Aaron is the tradition by which we can understand Moses continuously, that there's going to be a new way of understanding what was going on here, and that God is actively at work to make sure that we are able to understand in new ways, in our own way, through the work of theology, through the work of the church, so that we can still connect with this God who ultimately loves us and gets really pissed off when we don't accommodate our society to the disabled people among us.
Yeah, I'm dead on. And as hot in the nose as I may get about not having my own room to rant anymore, this is what
I'm sorry.
Bring on guests and I don't get to do my own. Y'all know me. I love to go off, but now I have to do the pastoral thing and make room for everyone else to go off. And now I just get to okay, fine, go off. You're not wrong. You guys have all nailed it. Like good job.
Okay, I know it's really really hard being a cis white man.
Yeah, I know, right? Anyway,
all right, so we've wrapped it. We've scooted it back over to Moses. Maybe we should wrap this up and continue in the next episode.
I am thinking that might be accurate. No further comments from the rest of y'all.
I'm good.
I have 2 hours more on this. Let's keep going, but we can move on to the next story, I guess.
All right. For those of you still sticking with us, thanks for hanging around. As usual, join us on the community Discord server. It's an actual honest-to-God church that exists in the internet and in person. If you're local to us in Japan, by the way, oh my God, like we are doing so many things at the church now. It is just unbelievable. Like we got weekly programs kicking off. Like I was literally here at the church.
Know this, but I'm U.S. side. So.
Yeah, I was at the church literally yesterday from. I rolled up about 9 a.m. and we was here till about 8. Like we were a full day here. The church was
that's a good
full.
thing, right?
Multiple meals were cooked. We had 2 different pools open in the yard, which cleaning that up was a bitch. But we had to have 15 kids run around this place at one point. Like it was wild, and this stuff is starting to pop off. We got services that are happening every Sunday. First Sunday of the month.
You're creating community. It's what
we're
church is
doing
supposed
the
to be.
thing. See, that's what happens when my wife joins me. Shit actually starts to happen.
I wasn't gonna say it,
but it's not wrong. Like
it's not wrong.
Nope, she's a way better local
Aki
community
is a
builder.
gift to us all.
Oh my God, yes. But no.
Pastor Reese.
Yes. So we are having worship services every Sunday now. We've got our English service online and in person on the first Sunday of every month. Japanese services with our partner congregation on the second and fourth Sundays. We have an in-person worship service and gathering on the third Sunday that is still currently not online. So if you're local, you can catch that. The online folks are going to be out of luck until we can figure the balance on that. We're bringing together our leadership committees right now, and one of the things on the discussion for our worship committee is how to have more worship services and other experiences. So if you're on the Discord server and want to join some committees and have that conversation, this would be a good time to do that, because we can, as the internet is fond of saying, do all the things.
And if I can just really quickly plug, if you'd like to hear more of my, 2 hours extra of ranting about this topic, we also have an episode on this coming out very soon on the Word in Black and Red. So please head on over and check it out. I think you'll really enjoy the conversation we have there with people who are much more in depth with disability theology than I am, and go really deep in what we're talking about here. You can also join the Llama Pack on those Sundays. I think it's actually literally the Sundays that y'all don't have online. We have a simple little, about half an hour service with the Llama Pack that you can come and be a part of as well, every other Sunday. So we'd love to have you.
All right. And of course, the one thing we ask you to do every time, and we make Courtney do it.
Like, share, and subscribe.
Yay,
Please.
thank you, Courtney. You're the best. Yay.
And yeah, seriously, come check out the Discord. I know, like, he and they both, like, repped their things. I'm just in places in the world and the internet. You may find me wandering here and there. Props to anybody who got that reference. But yeah, please come see us on Discord. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, send somebody this video if you think they might get a kick out of it. Comment below about something you liked, or we would prefer good faith conversation, but if you want to argue with us over nothing, you'll boost us in the algorithm. So
we've had a few already it's been a while, but we've had a few that wanted to really get up in there. So usually about wild, unrelated stuff, but
But yeah, anyway, so yeah, this has been a fantastic video, I think, huh?
Yeah. So we'll see you guys on the next one, which for you will be about a week, and for us will be about, a minute and a half. Bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.